So we'll use this part of the tutorial to introduce the a means of sample playback, very basic in Max, and we're going to do that using the sfplay object. So sfplay is an MSP object, we can tell because it's got the tilde at the end, and we're running out through these stripy cables which carry signal data to this object, which allows us to communicate with the sound card on our computers. So this is an easy DAC. And at the moment it's on, so signal is running, or at least signal processing is running in Max. And we need to open a sound file. So if I click on this message box, then it opens a dialog which allows us to choose a sound. So I'll choose a snare sound, and then this toggle is basically a start-stop message for sfplay. So when I click it, it plays. When I turn it off, then the message stop has gone into sfplay, although the sound wasn't really long enough for us to hear it stop. There you go. If I do that, you heard it. So that's fine. It plays back a sound. We could make that process a little bit easier. So if I unlock the patch, the open message, the sfplay object, has been programmed to recognise that as a message to open a dialog box and thereby to open a sound file. But actually we could modify this a little bit so that we could add, for example, drag-drop functionality. And to do that I'm going to I'm going to make life easy for myself. I know that the drop box in Max is called drop file. So this is the same with any object in Max. If you don't know, if you can't be bothered basically to look in this section up here, but you do know the name of the object, then if you write the name in a box, click out of that box, then it'll make the object for you. If I look up here, I suspect we would probably find the drop box. Is it in there or is it in buttons? Yeah, this is what I'm not so keen on with this this method of finding objects, is that it's not necessarily hugely easy to find things. There it is. So it's in this plus icon under interface and drag and drop files there. So drop file. Anyway, I've made one, and in this we basically drop any file we like. And what happens if you hover your cursor along the bottom, you'll see that there's two outlets. The one we're interested in is the one on the left, and it says, when you drop something on it, says path name of dropped file, which means if I make another message box just for now, let's make this a bit bigger, and I connect that to the right hand inlet of it. So the right hand inlet of a message box allows me to send a message to it and have that message displayed, and it's quite a quick and efficient way of seeing what message is being sent by a particular object. So it's very good for troubleshooting, and you should get into the habit of doing this, connecting displays up, or means of displaying something up when you can't figure out what a particular object is doing, because it will show you. So if I choose one of these sounds that I want to import, it won't import it at the moment, but if I drop that sound onto the drop file object, then you will see that what it's spitting out of this outlet is the file path. So system:/users me desktop sounds hat close.wav. So this is obviously the file, and this is the path. So that's all fine. That means we can now connect this to open. We need to do something very specific to open, which is to tell it to throughput this file path in conjunction with the word open, so that we get open and then the file path with the name of the file in it. So to do that, I'm going to put in this character, and this is a character that you'll come across quite a lot, in particularly if you're working with me, because I find it extremely useful. And what that does is it kind of acts as a wildcard. It allows you to throughput a message. So basically what will happen, and in fact we can watch it happening. So if I make another message box, drag another message box in, we can connect that to the right-hand inlet of the message box. And when I drag a file in, what have I done? Didn't mean to do that. Try again. Drag a file in, then you will see that it says open and then the file paths. So sfplay knows that it's getting the command open and then it's being told what to open. So open and then the file path. So just for clarification with this $1 business, actually I'll get rid of this bit here because I think that's confusing. Just up here I've got a way of showing how things are being throughput here. So my name is $1, and if I click on any one of these message boxes up here, the name Sarah, the name George, the name Gilbert will be sent into this message box. It won't change this part of the message, but it will update what's in this character here, $1. So if I click on Sarah, then what's spat out of the message box is my name is, and then Sarah because it's replacing this $1. Click on George and it replaces that. So that's being displayed in this message box down here. But that's just to show you what $1 is outputting. By the way, if you're wondering why it's got a 1 on it, that's because it will always output the first item in a list within this message. So there's only one item in each of these message boxes, but if I were to add another one, Sarah Smith, how about that? And then George Jones. Oops. For example, if I click on Sarah Smith, then we only get the Sarah bit. If we click on George Jones, we only get the George bit. If I wanted the other part of the message to appear, then I would write in $2. And it will see that there are 2 items in a list, and the second part of that, the second item in that list of things will be sent through this $2 bit. So now we'll get my name is Sarah Smith, my name is George Jones. It won't be clear to you at all at the moment why that might be useful, but you can see why the $1 might be useful when we're using this Dropbox to send a file through Open to sfplay. So I hope that clarifies that bit. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so how might we use this? Well, before we get the launch key to trigger sounds from sfplay, let me just show you that we could get sfplay to play back a sound whenever we drop a sound into the Dropbox here. So if I'm going to make a message box and put a number 1 in it, and I'll connect that to here. And if I drop a sound into the Dropbox, then it plays it back immediately. Why? Because when we drop a file on here, we get the file path going down this cable here into Open, and then it gives the file path and goes into sfplay. So that opens the sound file. Then immediately we're getting a message that's going down this cable into this message box which has a 1 in it. Now if you remember how Toggle works, Toggle sends either a 1 when you press it on or a 0 when you press it off. So all we need to get the file to play is a number 1. Hence, if you the message coming down here triggers the number 1, which in turn triggers sfplay and gets it to play. So that happens in a single, if you like, a single keystroke or a single drop of the thing, because they're both coming out of this outlet of the Dropbox. Why does it happen in that order? Well, this is something again we should come back to very soon, which is that Max always sends messages down cables in a right to left order, which means that it will always go down this cable and open the file before it goes down this one and attempts to play it. So we've established that the number 1 plays back the file within sfplay. So how can we use that in conjunction with our launchpad? Well, I mean, in these cases, we're only dealing with percussion sounds, so we've no need of a means of turning that sound off anymore. So I'm going to get rid of that toggle. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a note in. So remember that a note in gets data from note information on my keyboard, and so hopefully when I lock the patch and double click on this, my launch key is displayed. Now from the percussion pads, which is the input mechanism that I want to use, they come in on channel 10, so I need to put in note in channel 10, so that constrains any data that's coming into channel 10 information. And if I connect a number box to that and hit it, we're getting, every time I hit one of those pads, I'm getting a different note number. So that's good. So how do we get that to trigger the sound? Well, I could simply connect the number box to our message box with number 1 in it. But of course then, whichever pad I'm hitting, you notice that these numbers are changing, so I'm hitting a different pad. It doesn't matter which one I hit, we're still going to get a sound. And that's something we obviously we only want one of the pads to trigger that particular sound, because we might want a different pad to trigger a different one. So we want to be selective, and we've come across a means of being selective before. We will choose the select object. And then I need to choose which of my pads I want to select. So it will be the first one, which is pad number 40, or at least note number 40 on my drum pads. So I say select 40. And then that means that only that pad will trigger a sound. You might notice, by the way, that I'm getting a kind of double hit. So whenever I hit the key, I'm getting a drum sound, and when I release it, I'm getting it again. And that's because, if you remember from a previous tutorial, the note number is being sent twice, both when the note is being switched on and when it's being switched off. Now, we probably don't want that, so I'm going to use a particular object that gets rid of the second or the release version of that note number. So which I put in strip note, and that will do that for me. There we go. And now we're only getting it when I actually hit the key. So that's fine. That means, of course, that I could put in another number into select. So I could put 41, 42, and that should give me the first 3 pads on the launch key. So that would mean that if I duplicate all of this, so I select the bits I want to copy across, and then I press Alt and I drag it across, and then I'm going to press Command D to duplicate that again. Notice the spacing is the same when I do that. So once I've done that, I can connect this to the second sfplay message for triggering it, and the 42 to the third one. If I send in some different sounds to those, so I'm going to send a bass drum to this one, I'm going to send a snare to the second one, and I'm going to send a crash and a hat close to the third one. And by the way, what I don't want, in fact, is for it to play when I drop the sound file, so I'll get rid of these connectors. So now we have a sound in each of these sfplay objects. We've isolated each of the pads, and so each pad should now, that's one, that's another one, that's another one. So we have a very quick way of kind of dragging in some drum sounds and having them play back. Incidentally, just an aside, what we might want to do is to see the names of the sounds that we've imported. And I think, let me remember, I think there's an object called strip path, yes. So I could connect that to the bottom of the drop box, and if I do that and connect that then to a message box, and hopefully the path will be stripped off and we just end up with the name of the file. So now we know what's been imported to Max rather conveniently. So again, we had a snare last time, we had a bass in the bass, and we had a hat, whatever it was, in the top. So great. So okay, that's all fine, but what next? We might want to develop that in order to have each pad, which is velocity sensitive, play at a different loudness. Alright, so in the exercises that I've given you, I then give you a bit of code which kind of elaborates on that idea, and here it is. Now essentially there's many similarities between this code and the one we've just been making. There's a note in there which I should just make more specifically the percussion channel. I'll change that and correct it. So I think I ask in the exercises for you to choose notes on the, pads on the bottom row of the launch key, but get them to recognise velocity. So what's happening here? Well, what we're doing is note in is sending out the note number and the velocity, and we're packing that into a single message. So at the moment they're two separate messages when they first come in from note in, but here they're being packed into a single one. So again, we can test that by connecting it to a message box. And here, although these two are separate messages, now when we get them out of pack, they are a single message, they're just in a list. But still the same kind of note number velocity information applies, and when I release the key or the pad, then we get that 0. But actually it's the bottom row that we're interested in. So the bottom row, the first pad in the bottom row is the note number 36, as you see. And what's happening, we've got a root object here. Root is very, very similar to select, but instead of just taking one number, it takes, well, any number actually, but the first number is the one that determines the output, and then anything after that is spat out of it. So in this case, what's happened is that root sucks up the 36 that that came through here, assuming it recognises the 36, which it does in this case. It sucks that 36 up and it spits out the 39. Now the 39 goes into here, and then I'm dividing by 127, which gives me a number between 0 and 1, which I'm using to determine the loudness of the sound. So this bit I will come back to in due course, but basically what that's doing is allowing us to determine the loudness of the sound. The rest of it is happening just as it happened before, except that that number is being converted to a bang and triggering the number 1 and then triggering sfplay. So I hadn't actually imported a sound, so let's put a bass drum into there. So that's now been loaded into sfplay, and there we go. I had to hit it a bit harder, but you can hear it. But you'll notice that if I don't hit it very hard, we're now getting velocity information that's being translated into loudness information. By the way, the clicks are because I keep re-triggering when the thing hasn't faded. But yeah, this is a little bit of extra code which allows you to deal with that. And hopefully I explained it well enough for you to understand it. Obviously you can duplicate this element just as we did previously. Actually, maybe I'll do that quickly before I stop, to accommodate other sounds in other sfplay objects. So this time, instead of on the bottom row, it goes 36, 37 is the next pad, 38, 39, and so on. So we have 4 pads now. I can extend this out, and I'll do exactly what I did before, which is to, actually I probably only need these bits now. So I copy these across. Having selected them, I press Alt and drag. Then I press Command and D twice, and that gives me two more equally spaced versions of exactly that same patch fragment. And now I can kind of line up these outlets of the root object and connect them to the relevant objects so that we have consistency across all of them, and then all of them can be connected to this live gain thing here. Oops. Okay. And if I wanted to, I could do exactly what I did before and do the strip path, and you'd get the file name down here, but I won't do that because I don't want to spend the time doing it. So we've got a bass drum in the first thing, we've got a snare in the second one, we've got a tom low in the third, we've got a tom mid in the last one, and that means that each of our 4 pads triggers a different sound.